The bullet left Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez's rifle at 2,847 feet per second, crossing 1,200 yards of Afghan desert in less than 2 heartbeats. Through her scope, she watched Colonel Marcus Thompson collapse behind the concrete barrier, blood spreading across his tactical vest. For a moment, the world went silent except for the ringing in her ears from the rifle's report. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Target eliminated, she whispered into her radio, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. 12 hours earlier, that same colonel had stood in the briefing tent and declared her the weakest link in Delta Company, a liability. Someone who would get good soldiers killed because she couldn't handle the pressure when it mattered most. The words had cut deeper than any physical wound, delivered in front of 30 battle-hardened Marines who had looked at her with a mixture of pity and doubt. Now, as she watched the colonel's tactical team drag into safety behind the wall, Elena realized that everything she thought she knew about this mission had been a lie. The man she'd just saved wasn't supposed to be in that compound. The target she'd eliminated wasn't on their mission roster. And the radio chatter flooding her earpiece suggested that half of Delta Company was walking into a trap that would make their previous losses look like a training exercise that she had one perfect shot to change everything. The question was whether anyone would believe her when she explained why she had to take it. Elena Rodriguez had been 9 years old when she first held a rifle. Her grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, had been a Marine sniper in Vietnam, and he'd recognized something in his granddaughter's steady hands and patient temperament that reminded him of his own younger self. The old Remington 700 had been almost too heavy for her small frame, but she'd managed to keep it steady against the wooden shooting bench while Miguel adjusted the scope. "Breathing is everything, Mia," he'd said, his weathered hands guiding hers to the proper position. "You breathe in, you breathe out, and in that moment between breaths, the world stops moving. That's when you take your shot." The target had been a simple paper bullseye at 50 yards. But when Elena squeezed the trigger and watched the hole appear dead center, she'd felt something click into place. A sense of purpose that would define the next 20 years of her life. Growing up in Bakersfield, California, Elena had been the kind of kid who preferred solitary activities to group sports. While her classmates played soccer or basketball, she spent her afternoons at the local shooting range with Miguel, learning to read wind patterns and calculate bullet drop. By the time she was 16, she was consistently outshooting adults with decades more experience. Her parents, both teachers, had hoped their daughter would follow them into education or perhaps pursue medicine. Elena had always been brilliant academically, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while simultaneously holding junior shooting records at 3 different ranges. But there had been something about the precision required for long-range shooting that appealed to her mathematical mind. The variables were complex but knowable: wind speed, humidity, target distance, bullet weight, barrel temperature. Unlike human behavior, ballistics followed predictable laws. The decision to enlist had come during her senior year of high school, much to her parents' dismay. The Army recruiter had been impressed by her shooting credentials and academic record, fast-tracking her into the sniper program after basic training. At 19, Elena had been the youngest graduate in her class at the U.S. Army Sniper School at Fort Benning, Georgia. Her first deployment to Afghanistan had been a revelation. The Hindu Kush Mountains provided the kind of long-range shooting opportunities that most snipers only dreamed of. Targets at 800, 1,000, even 1,200 yards became routine. Elena discovered she had an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions, adjusting her shots for factors that other snipers couldn't even perceive. But technical skill, she learned, was only part of being an effective sniper. The psychological pressure of taking human lives, often while looking directly at their faces through a high-powered scope, had broken stronger soldiers than her. Elena had developed her own coping mechanisms, treating each shot as a mathematical problem to be solved rather than a moral choice to be agonized over. By her third deployment, she had 43 confirmed kills and a reputation for impossible shots under extreme conditions. Her spotter, Corporal James Mitchell, had been with her for 18 months and had developed an almost telepathic understanding of her shooting rhythm. Together, they'd become one of the most effective sniper teams in the theater. That's what made Colonel Thompson's assessment so devastating. The briefing had taken place in a canvas tent outside Forward Operating Base Wolverine, 30 miles from the Pakistani border. Delta Company had been tasked with a high-value target elimination in a compound known to house Taliban leadership. Intelligence suggested the target would be present for only a narrow window, making precision and timing crucial. Elena had been studying the mission parameters when Colonel Thompson had entered the tent, his expression grim. Marcus Thompson was a career officer, 42 years old, with a reputation for aggressive tactics and zero tolerance for weakness. He'd been assigned to Delta Company only 3 weeks earlier, replacing their previous commander who had been killed by an IED. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson had announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Tomorrow's mission is going to test every skill you've developed over the past 2 years. We're going after Halil Nazir, the Taliban commander responsible for the attacks on our supply convoys." The tent had fallen silent. Nazir was a ghost, a target they'd been hunting for months without success. Intelligence on his location was typically outdated. By the time it reached tactical units, "The compound is heavily fortified," Thompson continued, pointing to aerial photographs pinned to a makeshift board. "Multiple escape routes, overlapping fields of fire, and civilian shields. We'll have one opportunity to eliminate the target before he disappears again." Elena had studied the photographs, automatically calculating shooting angles and distances. The compound sat in a valley surrounded by rocky hills, with the nearest viable shooting position approximately 1,100 yards from the main building. It was a challenging shot, but well within her capabilities. "Rodriguez," Thompson had said, his tone sharp enough to cut glass, "you'll be providing overwatch from Hill 347. Your job is to eliminate any sentries who might compromise the assault team's approach." It was a standard assignment, the kind of mission Elena had executed dozens of times. But something in Thompson's tone suggested he wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his eyes fixed on Elena with unmistakable skepticism, "I want to be clear about the chain of command here. This is a complex operation with multiple moving parts. I won't have it compromised by someone who can't handle the pressure when lives are on the line." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Elena felt 30 pairs of eyes turned toward her, waiting for her response. "Sir, I don't understand," she said carefully, maintaining eye contact despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "What I understand, Sergeant Rodriguez, is that you've built a reputation on taking long shots at stationary targets. But tomorrow, you'll be dealing with a dynamic tactical situation where split-second decisions can mean the difference between mission success and dead Marines." Elena's spotter, Corporal Mitchell, shifted uncomfortably beside her. The entire tent had gone silent, the only sound the distant hum of generators and the occasional crack of small arms fire from the perimeter. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has 43 confirmed kills under combat conditions," Mitchell said, his voice carefully neutral. "Her accuracy rate under pressure is—" "I'm not questioning her accuracy, Corporal," Thompson interrupted. "I'm questioning her judgment. Long-range shooting requires patience and deliberation. Infantry combat requires instant decision-making under chaotic conditions. They're completely different skill sets." Elena felt her jaw tighten. She'd been in more firefights than she could count, had made life-or-death decisions under conditions that would have paralyzed most people. But challenging a superior officer in front of the entire company would be career suicide. "I understand your concerns, sir," she said instead. "What would you like me to do differently?" Thompson's smile was razor-thin. "Follow orders, Sergeant. Nothing more, nothing less. Leave the tactical decisions to people who understand the bigger picture." The briefing had continued for another hour, covering approach routes, communication protocols, and extraction procedures. But Elena had barely heard any of it. Thompson's words echoed in her mind. A liability who couldn't handle pressure. Someone who would get good soldiers killed. After the briefing, Mitchell had found her sitting on a crate outside the tent, cleaning her rifle with mechanical precision. "Don't let him get to you," he said, settling beside her. "He's new, trying to establish dominance. It's not personal." Elena looked up from her weapon, her dark eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of the base. "Isn't it? He basically called me incompetent in front of the entire company. He called you inexperienced in dynamic situations. There's a difference." "I've been in more dynamic situations than he has," Elena said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I've taken shots while under direct fire, eliminated targets while our position was being overrun, made decisions that saved lives when communication broke down. What more does he want?" Mitchell was quiet for a moment, watching her work. Elena's hands moved with practiced efficiency, breaking down the rifle's components and inspecting each piece for wear or damage. It was a ritual she performed religiously, a meditation that helped her focus. "I think he wants to see you make the hard choice," Mitchell said finally. "The kind of decision that goes against your training but saves lives anyway." Elena reassembled the rifle, her movements fluid and automatic. "What kind of decision?" "The kind where you have to choose between following orders and doing what's right. The kind where there's no time to ask permission and no guarantee you'll be backed up afterward." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She looked at him, seeing something in his expression that made her stomach tighten. "James, what aren't you telling me?" Mitchell glanced around to make sure they were alone, then leaned closer. "I've been monitoring radio chatter from higher command. There's something about tomorrow's mission that doesn't add up. The intelligence on Nazir's location came from a single source, no verification. The timing is too convenient, the target too exposed." "You think it's a trap?" "I think someone wants us to believe it's a trap, but that doesn't mean it isn't one anyway." Elena stared at him, processing the implications. Why would the command send us into a trap? Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe someone else would. The conversation had ended there, but Elena had spent the rest of the night thinking about Mitchell's words. She'd reviewed the mission parameters, studied the satellite photos, and analyzed the intelligence reports. Nothing jumped out as obviously wrong, but there was something about the whole situation that felt off. At 04:00 hours, Delta Company had moved out under cover of darkness. Elena and Mitchell had separated from the main group, taking a circuitous route to their overwatch position on Hill 347. The climb had been treacherous, over loose shale and through narrow passages that barely accommodated their equipment. By sunrise, they were in position. Elena had set up her rifle behind a natural rock formation that provided both concealment and a clear view of the compound below. Through her scope, she could see the building where Nazir was supposedly meeting with his lieutenants. The compound was exactly as described in the briefing, a collection of mud brick buildings surrounded by a high wall, with guards posted at regular intervals. Elena counted 7 sentries, all armed with AK-47s and positioned to cover the most likely approach routes. "Overwatch in position," she reported into her radio. 7 targets visible, all armed. "Copy, Overwatch," came Thompson's response. "Assault team moving to phase line Alpha. Maintain radio silence until we reach the compound. Elena settled in to wait. Long-range shooting required infinite patience, the ability to remain perfectly still for hours while maintaining constant vigilance. She'd learned to enter a meditative state, her breathing slow and controlled, her heartbeat steady. Through her scope, she watched the compound's daily routine unfold. Guards changed shifts every 2 hours. Civilians moved in and out of the buildings, carrying supplies and conducting business. Children played in the courtyard, their laughter carrying across the desert air. At 0830 hours, Elena spotted movement on the compound's northern perimeter. Delta Company was approaching, their camouflaged forms barely visible against the rocky terrain. She tracked their progress through her scope, ready to eliminate any sentries who might spot them. That's when she saw him, Colonel. Thompson was supposed to be coordinating the assault from a command post 2 miles away. Instead, he was moving with the lead squad, his distinctive silhouette unmistakable through Elena's high-powered scope. He was carrying a radio and what appeared to be a briefcase, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly where he was going. Elena keyed her radio. "Control, this is Overwatch. I have eyes on Hammer 6 moving with the assault. Team, repeat, Hammer 6 is not at the command post. Silence. Control, do you copy? Hammer 6 is in the compound perimeter." More silence. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. She tried switching to the emergency frequency, then to the backup channel. Nothing. Either her radio was malfunctioning, or someone was jamming her communications. Through her scope, she watched Thompson approach the compound's main gate. The guards didn't challenge him. Instead, they opened the gate and escorted him inside, their movements casual and familiar. Elena's mind raced. Thompson was meeting with someone inside the compound. Someone who was expecting him. Someone who had arranged for the guards to let him pass without question. She shifted her scope to track the assault team's progress. They were now within 200 yards of the compound, moving in standard formation toward what they believed was a hostile target. If they breached the walls, they would walk into a prepared ambush. Elena tried her radio again. Still nothing. She had a choice to make. Follow Thompson's orders and maintain her position, or abandon her post to warn the assault team. Either decision could get people killed. That's when she saw the sniper. He was positioned on the compound's eastern wall, concealed behind a parapet with a clear view of the assault team's approach route. Elena could see the distinctive shape of a Dragunov rifle, its scope glinting in the morning sun. The sniper was tracking the Marines' movement, waiting for them to come within range. Elena shifted her aim, calculating the distance and wind conditions. The target was at 1,100 yards. A challenging shot, but well within her capabilities. She could eliminate the sniper before he could engage the assault team, but killing the sniper would reveal her position and potentially compromise the entire mission. If Thompson was conducting some kind of authorized operation inside the compound, her interference could destroy months of planning. Elena made her decision. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the sniper in the center of his chest, spinning him around and dropping him behind the parapet. The shot echoed across the desert, a sound that would alert everyone within miles. Immediately, the compound erupted into chaos. Guards shouted orders, civilians screamed and ran for cover, and Elena could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions. As the defenders opened fire on the assault team, through her scope, she watched Thompson emerge from the main building, his face a mask of rage and confusion. He was shouting into his radio, probably trying to coordinate a response to the unexpected sniper fire. That's when Elena saw the second sniper. This one was positioned on the compound's western wall, his rifle trained not on the assault team, but on Thompson himself. Elena watched in horror as the sniper's finger tightened on the trigger. She had perhaps 2 seconds to make a decision that would define the rest of her life. Elena Rodriguez, the liability who couldn't handle pressure, swung her rifle toward the second sniper and fired the shot that would change everything. Elena's second bullet traveled across the desert at the exact moment the enemy sniper's finger began to squeeze his trigger. The physics of the situation were unforgiving. Two projectiles launched simultaneously, each carrying the potential to end a life, each guided by hands trained in the art of precision killing. Elena's shot struck the enemy sniper high in the shoulder, spinning him away from his rifle just as his own bullet discharged into the compound's courtyard, missing Colonel Thompson by inches. The enemy marksman tumbled backward off the wall, his weapon clattering onto the stone below. Through her scope, Elena watched Thompson dive for cover behind a concrete barrier, his radio flying from his hands as he hit the ground. Blood was spreading across his tactical vest, but Elena couldn't tell if he'd been hit by shrapnel or debris from the near miss. "Sniper down," she reported into her radio, though she wasn't sure anyone could hear her. "Hammer 6 is taking cover behind the eastern wall." The compound had transformed into a battlefield. The assault team, finally realizing they were walking into a prepared ambush, had taken cover behind a series of abandoned vehicles outside the main gate. Elena could see muzzle flashes from at least 12 different positions as Taliban fighters engaged the Marines with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. Corporal Mitchell was scanning the area with his binoculars, calling out targets and adjusting Elena's aim. "Shooter on the north wall, second window from the left. Range 1,050 yards. Elena acquired the target, a bearded fighter with an RPG launcher. She adjusted for wind and elevation, her breathing steady despite the chaos unfolding below. The shot was clean, dropping the RPG gunner before he could fire at the pinned Marines. "Target eliminated," she whispered, already shifting to find the next threat. But something was wrong with the tactical situation. The Taliban fighters were well positioned and heavily armed, but their fire discipline was sloppy. They were shooting in full automatic, wasting ammunition and revealing their positions unnecessarily for an ambush that had supposedly been planned to eliminate Delta Company. It seemed remarkably disorganized. Elena's radio crackled to life with a voice she didn't recognize. "Overwatch, this is Phantom 6. We have your position. Maintain fire on the compound walls. Phantom 6, this is Overwatch. I don't have you on my frequency roster. Please identify yourself. Classification is need to know, Overwatch. Continue. Engaging targets on the compound walls." Elena exchanged a glance with Mitchell. Phantom 6 wasn't part of their operation. She'd memorized every call sign and frequency for the mission, and this voice wasn't on any of them. "James, somethings." "Not right here," she said, lowering her rifle slightly. "Who the hell is Phantom 6? Mitchell was studying the compound through his spotting scope, his expression troubled. "I count at least 20 muzzle flashes down there, but I'm only seeing maybe 8 actual shooters. The rest of the firing positions are empty." Elena raised her rifle again, scanning the compound systematically. Mitchell was right. The volume of fire suggested a large force, but when she looked carefully, she could see that many of the muzzle flashes were coming from unmanned positions. Someone was using remote-controlled weapons or timed charges to simulate a larger force. "It's a show," she said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "They're putting on a performance for someone. For who?" Before Elena could answer, she spotted movement near the compound's main building. Colonel Thompson was emerging from his cover, moving in a crouch toward a side entrance. He was carrying his briefcase and what appeared to be a satellite phone. Elena tracked him through her scope, watching as he approached a man in traditional Afghan clothing who was waiting by the door. The two men shook hands, and Thompson handed over the briefcase. "Oh shit," Elena breathed. "What is it?" "Thompson's not here to eliminate a target. He's here to make a deal." Elena watched through her scope as Thompson and the Afghan man disappeared into the building. The tactical situation suddenly made sense. The assault team wasn't meant to succeed. They were meant to provide cover for Thompson's meeting, to make it look like a legitimate military operation, while he conducted whatever business required a briefcase exchange in the middle of enemy territory. But that still didn't explain the snipers who had been targeting Thompson. If this was a prearranged meeting, why had someone tried to kill him? Elena's radio crackled again. Overwatch, this is Phantom 6. We show movement in the main building. Prepare to engage. Phantom 6, the building is not a designated target. I repeat, the building is not a designated target. Your orders have changed, Overwatch. Engage the building. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. Someone was ordering her to fire on the building where Thompson was conducting his meeting. Someone who identified themselves with a call sign that didn't officially exist. She keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. Any station, this is Overwatch. I need immediate contact with higher command. Priority Alpha. Static. Elena tried 3 more frequencies, including the one reserved for commander-level communications. Nothing but static and the occasional burst of electronic noise that suggested active jamming. Elena, we've got a problem, Mitchell said, his voice tight with concern. Check your 6 o'clock. Elena turned to look behind their position. 300 yards down the hillside, she could see the distinctive shapes of 2 men in military fatigues climbing toward their position. They were moving with the purposeful stride of professionals, and they were carrying weapons. Are they ours? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Negative, wrong gear, wrong movement pattern. And they're coming from the wrong direction. Elena's mind raced. Unknown personnel approaching their position, mysterious voices on the radio giving unauthorized orders, and a colonel conducting secret business in enemy territory. The mission had gone from routine Overwatch to something far more dangerous. James, I need you to get on the radio and try to reach anyone from Delta Company. Use the backup frequencies. Try everything. What are you going to do? Elena was already adjusting her rifle, calculating angles and distances. I'm going to find out who's trying to kill Thompson and why. Through her scope, she could see the 2 men climbing the hill were now only 200 yards away. They were carrying M4 carbines and moving with the coordination of a trained team. Elena estimated they would reach her position in less than 10 minutes. She had to make a choice. She could engage the approaching threats, potentially revealing her position to everyone in the compound. Or she could abandon her Overwatch position, leaving the assault team without sniper support. Elena made her decision. James, pack up the gear. We're moving to a secondary position. Elena, if we move now, we'll lose sight of the compound. The assault team will be blind. If we stay here, we'll be dead in 8 minutes. Those men aren't coming up here to chat. Mitchell began breaking down their equipment while Elena covered their approach. The 2 men were now close enough for her to see their faces through her scope. She didn't recognize either of them, but their gear and movement suggested special operations training. Elena keyed her radio one more time. Delta 6, this is Overwatch. We have unknown personnel approaching our position. Relocating to secondary Overwatch. How to copy? Static. Delta 6, do you copy? We are compromised and relocating. Still nothing. Elena and Mitchell began their tactical withdrawal, moving along the ridgeline toward a secondary position they had identified during their initial reconnaissance. The new location would give them a different angle on the compound, but it would take them 15 minutes to reach it. As they moved, Elena's radio crackled with a new voice. Overwatch, this is Delta 6. We're taking heavy fire and need immediate support on the north wall. Elena stopped moving. The voice was wrong. She knew every member of Delta Company's leadership, and the man claiming to be Delta 6 wasn't Captain Martinez. James, that's not Martinez, she whispered. Then who is it? Elena was starting to understand the scope of what they were facing. Someone had infiltrated their communications network, was jamming their frequencies, and was now impersonating their unit commander. The two men climbing the hill were probably part of the same operation. "We're in the middle of something big," Elena said, resuming their movement along the ridge. "Someone's running a complex operation, and we just stumbled into it." They reached their secondary position just as Elena's radio erupted with multiple voices, all claiming to be different members of Delta Company. The chatter was chaotic and contradictory, with overlapping orders and conflicting status reports. Elena set up her rifle and immediately began scanning the compound. Through her scope, she could see that the firefight was still ongoing, but the pattern of engagement had changed. The Taliban fighters were now concentrating their fire on specific positions, as if they were trying to pin down the assault team, rather than eliminate them. "Elena, look at this," Mitchell said, handing her his spotting scope. "Check out the main building." Elena looked through the scope and saw Colonel Thompson emerging from the building, still carrying his briefcase. But now he was accompanied by two men in military fatigues who were escorting him toward the compound's rear exit. "He's leaving," Elena said. "They're extracting him." "But what about the assault team?" Elena shifted her scope to observe the Marines. Position. They were still pinned down behind the vehicles, taking sporadic fire from the compound walls. But she could see something that made her blood run cold. The Taliban fighters were repositioning themselves, moving to surround the Marines. Position. It wasn't a random firefight anymore. It was a coordinated effort to trap Delta Company in a kill zone. Elena's radio crackled again. "Overwatch, this is Phantom 6. We need immediate fire on the vehicle position. Danger close." "Phantom 6. That's a negative. I have friendly forces in that position." "Overwatch, you will engage that position immediately." "That is a direct order." Elena felt her finger tighten on the trigger, but not to engage the Marines. She was being ordered to fire on her own people by someone who was using an unauthorized call sign and had access to military communications equipment. "James, whoever Phantom 6 is, they want me to kill our own guys." Mitchell was scanning the area with his binoculars. "Elena, we've got more movement. Check out Hill 295, about 800 yards northeast." Elena swung her rifle toward the indicated position and immediately saw what Mitchell was referring to. Another sniper team was setting up on the adjacent hill, their rifle trained on the compound below, but they weren't aiming at the Taliban fighters. They were aiming at Colonel Thompson. Elena watched through her scope as the enemy sniper acquired his target. Thompson was now outside the compound, moving toward a helicopter that was landing in a clearing about 500 yards away. The sniper was tracking his movement, waiting for a clear shot. Elena had perhaps 30 seconds before the sniper would fire. She could engage the enemy marksman, potentially saving Thompson's life. But Thompson was apparently involved in some kind of illegal operation, and saving him might be protecting a traitor, or she could let the sniper take his shot, eliminating Thompson but potentially allowing whatever conspiracy he was involved in to continue. Elena made her choice. She swung her rifle toward the enemy sniper and fired. The bullet struck the enemy marksman in the head, dropping him instantly. His spotter immediately began scanning the hills, trying to locate Elena's position. "Target eliminated," Elena reported, though she wasn't sure who she was reporting to anymore. Through her scope, she watched Thompson reach the helicopter and climb aboard. The aircraft lifted off immediately, banking away from the compound and disappearing over the mountains. Elena's radio exploded with activity. Multiple voices were now demanding that she engage various targets, each claiming to have command authority. The cacophony was overwhelming, but Elena ignored it all. She had a more pressing concern. The enemy sniper's spotter had located her position and was now directing fire toward her location. Elena could see muzzle flashes from the adjacent hill as automatic weapons, opened up on her secondary position. James. We need to move again. Now. Elena, where are we going? We're running out of hills. Elena was already packing her rifle, her movements efficient and automatic. We're going down there. Down where? To the compound. I need to find out what Thompson was doing in there, and I need to make sure our guys get out alive. Mitchell stared at her. Elena, that's suicide. There's at least 20 fighters in that compound. Not fighters, Elena said, slinging her rifle across her back. Actors. This whole thing is a performance, and we're the only ones who know the script. As they began their descent toward the compound, Elena's radio crackled one more time. Overwatch. This is Delta 6. We're preparing to extract. Cover our withdrawal. This time Elena recognized the voice. It was Captain Martinez, the real Delta 6. Delta 6, this is Overwatch. Confirm your authentication code. Overwatch, authentication is Bravo 77. Elena felt relief flood through her system. Martinez was using the correct code, which meant she was finally talking to someone. From her actual unit, Delta 6, this is Overwatch. I have critical intelligence about the mission. The compound is not what it appears to be. Overwatch, explain. Sir, Colonel Thompson was conducting an unauthorized meeting inside the compound. Someone tried to eliminate him, and someone else has been jamming our communications and impersonating command authority. Silence. Delta 6, do you copy? Overwatch. That's a very serious accusation. Do you have proof? Elena looked down at the compound, where the firefight was still raging. She had seen Thompson's meeting, witnessed the briefcase exchange, and saved his life from at least 2 different sniper teams. But proving any of it would be nearly impossible. Sir, I need you to trust me. This mission is compromised, and we're all in danger. Overwatch, return to base immediately. We'll sort this out in debrief. Elena felt the familiar weight of command authority pressing down on her. Martinez was giving her a direct order to abandon her position and return to base. Following that order would be the safe, career-preserving choice. But Elena Rodriguez had already made the choice to stop being safe. Delta 6, I'm going to need you to trust me on this one. I'm moving to support your extraction, but I need to secure evidence from the compound first. Overwatch, that is not your mission. Return to base immediately. Elena switched off her radio and looked at Mitchell. You can go back if you want, James. No one will blame you. Mitchell shouldered his gear and checked his sidearm. Elena, I've been your spotter for 18 months. I'm not about to stop now. They began their descent toward the compound, moving through the rocky terrain with the careful precision of hunters stalking dangerous prey. Elena's mind was racing with possibilities and calculations. Someone had orchestrated an elaborate deception involving fake Taliban fighters, jamming equipment, and multiple sniper teams. Someone with access to military communications and the authority to deploy personnel. Someone who had wanted Colonel Thompson dead until Elena intervened. The question was whether she had saved the right person or protected the wrong one. Elena Rodriguez was about to find out. The descent toward the compound took Elena and Mitchell through a maze of boulder fields and narrow ravines that provided excellent concealment but made movement treacherous. Elena's grandfather had taught her that patience was a sniper's greatest weapon, but patience wouldn't help if the evidence of Thompson's meeting disappeared before she could secure it. They reached the compound's outer perimeter just as the intensity of gunfire began to diminish. Elena could see the assault team preparing to withdraw, their movements coordinated and professional despite the chaos of the engagement. Captain Martinez was directing the extraction from behind an overturned truck, his radio antenna visible above the metal debris. Elena, look at this, Mitchell whispered, pointing toward the compound's eastern wall. Elena followed his indication and saw something that made her stomach drop. 3 Taliban fighters were casually walking away from their positions, their weapons slung across their backs as if they were leaving work at the end of a shift. They weren't retreating under fire or taking casualties. They were simply departing, their part in the performance apparently concluded. "This gets worse every minute," Alina muttered, checking her sidearm and adjusting her equipment. They approached the compound's rear entrance, the same door where Elena had witnessed Thompson's meeting. The area was now deserted, but Alina could see fresh tire tracks in the dirt, leading toward the helicopter landing zone. Someone had driven vehicles through here recently, probably to transport whatever Thompson had delivered in his briefcase. Elena examined the door itself. It was heavy wood reinforced with metal bands, the kind of construction that would stop small arms fire but could be breached with explosives. More importantly, it was unlocked. "James, this doesn't make sense," Alina said, testing the doors. "Handle. If this compound was really a Taliban stronghold, why would they leave their rear entrance unsecured during a firefight?" Mitchell was scanning the surrounding area with his binoculars, because they knew nobody would be coming through here. "Except us." Elena pushed the door open and immediately smelled cordite and cigarette smoke. The interior was a single large room with concrete floors and bare walls, furnished only with a few metal tables and chairs. But what caught Elena's attention was the equipment. Along the far wall, she could see radio equipment, computer terminals, and what appeared to be electronic jamming devices. Everything was still powered on, with indicator lights blinking, and displays showing various frequencies and signal strengths. "This is a command center," Elena said, moving toward the equipment. "Someone's been running a communications operation from here." Mitchell was examining the tables, where Elena could see papers scattered across the surface. "Elena, you need to see this." Elena joined him at the table and immediately recognized military communications logs, frequency assignments, and personnel rosters, but these weren't standard military documents. The call signs were wrong, the unit designations didn't match anything she knew, and the authentication codes were completely unfamiliar. "This is a parallel command structure," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone's been impersonating a military command using fake call signs and stolen authentication codes." Mitchell picked up a document that made Elena's blood run cold. It was a mission briefing, typed on official military letterhead, describing Operation Sandstorm. According to the document, the objective was the elimination of Colonel Marcus Thompson and the recovery of classified materials he was attempting to sell to enemy forces. "Elena, according to this, Thompson is a traitor, and we're the assassination team." Elena read the document carefully. It described Thompson's alleged plans to sell classified military technology to Taliban forces in exchange for personal profit. The mission called for his elimination during a staged firefight that would make his death appear to be the result of enemy action. But the document also contained details that Elena knew were wrong. The unit designations, the personnel assignments, and the tactical procedures didn't match actual military protocols. Someone had created an elaborate fiction and was using it to justify Thompson's assassination. "James, this is all fake," Elena sighed, holding up the document. "The letterhead is wrong, the formatting is wrong, and the command structure doesn't exist. Someone's created a complete fabrication, but why? If Thompson isn't a traitor, why would someone want him dead?" Elena was about to answer when she heard footsteps outside the room, heavy boots on concrete, moving with military precision. She motioned for Mitchell to take cover behind the equipment rack while she positioned herself near the door. 3 men entered the room, all wearing military fatigues with no identifying patches or insignia. They were carrying M4 carbines and moving with the coordinated precision of special operations personnel. Elena recognized one of them as the man who had been climbing toward their original position. "Control, this is Phantom Team," the lead man said into his radio. "We've secured the command center. Rodriguez and Mitchell are not present." Elena felt ice forming in her veins. These men were looking for her specifically, and they were using the same phantom call sign that had been giving her unauthorized orders. "Copy, Phantom Team," came the response. "Locate the targets and eliminate them. Clean up the command center and prepare for extraction." Elena exchanged a glance with Mitchell. They were now officially targets for elimination, and the men hunting them had military training and superior firepower. The lead man began examining the equipment while his companions secured the room. Elena could see him checking the radio logs and computer terminals, apparently looking for something specific. "Control, the equipment is still active," he reported. "Rodriguez may have accessed the communications logs." "Phantom Team, that's unacceptable. Find those logs and destroy everything. We cannot have any evidence of the operation." Elena realized she was holding crucial evidence in her hands. The fake mission briefing, the communications logs, and the equipment in this room proved that someone had orchestrated an elaborate deception. But she needed to get the evidence too. People who could act on it. She carefully folded the mission briefing and tucked it into her gear, then signaled Mitchell to prepare for movement. They needed to exit the room before the Phantom Team discovered them. Elena waited until the three men were focused on the equipment, then made her move. She slipped out of the room through the rear door, with Mitchell following close behind. They had perhaps 2 minutes before the Phantom Team realized they were gone. "Elena, where are we going?" Mitchell whispered as they moved through the compound's corridors. "To find Captain Martinez. He needs to see this evidence." They made their way toward the compound's main entrance, where Elena could still hear sporadic gunfire from the ongoing extraction. The assault team was maintaining a defensive perimeter while preparing to withdraw, unaware that the entire engagement was a carefully orchestrated deception. Elena reached the compound's main gate just as she heard shouts from behind them. The Phantom Team had discovered their escape and was now pursuing them through the corridors. "Contact front," one of the men shouted. "Targets are moving toward the main gate." Elena could hear automatic weapons fire erupting from inside the compound as the Phantom Team engaged what they thought were Elena's positions. But the shots were wild and desperate, suggesting they were shooting at shadows. Elena spotted Captain Martinez behind the overturned truck, coordinating the extraction with hand signals. She sprinted toward his position, keeping low to avoid the crossfire. "Captain Martinez," she called out as she reached his position. Martinez turned, his face showing surprise and concern. "Rodriguez, what the hell are you doing down here? I ordered you to return to base." "Sir, I have critical evidence about the mission," Elena said, pulling out the fake briefing document. "This entire operation is a setup." Martinez examined the document while maintaining his position behind the truck. Elena could see his expression change as he read the contents. "Rodriguez, where did you get this?" "From a command center inside the compound, sir. Someone's been running a parallel operation using fake military credentials." Martinez looked at the document again, his face grim. "This is serious, Rodriguez. If this is authentic, it means someone in the military hierarchy is involved in an illegal operation." "Sir, it's not authentic. That's the point. Someone created fake orders to justify killing Colonel Thompson." Martinez was about to respond when automatic weapons fire erupted from the compound's main building. Elena could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions as the Phantom Team engaged the assault team. "Martinez, we've got hostiles inside the compound," one of the Marines shouted. "They're engaging from the main building." Elena realized the situation was about to escalate beyond anyone's control. The Phantom Team was now trapped inside the compound with Delta Company outside, and both sides were armed with military weapons. "Sir, those men inside the compound are not Taliban," Elena said urgently. "They're the same people who've been jamming our communications and impersonating command authority." Martinez looked at her, his eyes reflecting the weight of command decisions. "Rodriguez, that's a very serious accusation. Do you have any proof besides this document?" Elena was about to respond when her radio crackled to life with a familiar voice. "Delta 6, this is Overwatch 2. We have your position under observation." Elena felt her heart skip. Overwatch 2 was supposed to be her call sign, but she was standing right here. Someone was impersonating her on the radio. "Delta 6, this is the real Overwatch," Elena said into her radio. "The voice you just heard is not me. I repeat, someone is impersonating my call sign." Martinez looked at her with growing concern. "Rodriguez, this is getting out of hand. We need to extract it immediately and sort this out at the base. Sir, with respect, if we leave now, all the evidence disappears. The people responsible for this operation will clean up their tracks and will never know what really happened." Martinez was about to respond when Elena's radio erupted with multiple voices, all claiming to be different members of Delta Company. The chatter was chaotic and contradictory, with overlapping orders and conflicting status reports. "Delta 6. This is Delta 2. We're taking heavy casualties and need immediate extraction. Delta 6. This is Delta 3. We have the compound secured and are prepared to advance. Delta 6. This is Overwatch. I have multiple targets in the compound and am requesting permission to engage." Elena listened to the cacophony with growing horror. Someone had infiltrated every level of their communications network and was now impersonating the entire command structure. "Captain, none of those voices are real," Elena said. "Someone is running a sophisticated electronic warfare operation against us." Martinez looked at his radio, then at Elena, then at the compound where gunfire was still erupting. Elena could see him struggling with the implications of what she was telling him. "Rodriguez, assuming you're right about all this, what do you recommend?" Elena had been hoping he would ask that question. "Sir, we need to secure the command center. Inside the compound. That's where all the evidence is, and it's where we can shut down their communications operation. That's a direct assault on a fortified position with unknown enemy strength. Sir, it's not a fortified position. It's a movie set. The Taliban fighters are actors, the defensive positions are props, and the real threat is 3 men with military training who are trying to cover up their operation." Martinez studied Elena's face, looking for any sign of deception or instability. Elena met his gaze steadily, knowing that her credibility was the only thing standing between the truth and a successful cover-up. "Rodriguez, if you're wrong about this, we're all going to face court-martial proceedings. Sir, if I'm right about this, we're all going to face assassination attempts." Martinez made his decision. "All right, Rodriguez. But we do this by the book. You'll guide us to the command center, we'll secure the evidence, and then we'll extract it immediately." Elena felt relief flood through her system. Martinez was willing to trust her judgment, even though everything she was telling him contradicted his understanding of the mission. "Sir, there's one more thing," Elena said. "Colonel Thompson may not be the traitor everyone thinks he is. I think he's actually an undercover investigator who is trying to expose the real conspiracy." Martinez stared at her. "Rodriguez, you're suggesting that a full colonel was running a covert operation without informing his subordinate commanders?" "Sir, I'm suggesting that someone in the military hierarchy is involved in illegal activities, and Thompson was investigating them when he was targeted for elimination." Martinez was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. "Rodriguez, do you understand what you're suggesting? You're talking about a conspiracy that reaches to the highest levels of command." Elena looked at the compound, where the gunfire was finally beginning to subside. "Sir, I understand exactly what I'm suggesting. The question is whether we're going to do something about it." Martinez checked his weapon and signaled his men to prepare for movement. "All right, Rodriguez, show us this command center." "But Rodriguez?" "Yes." Sir, you better be right about this. Because if you're wrong, we're all going to spend the rest of our lives in military prison. Elena shouldered her rifle and prepared to lead Delta Company into the compound. She thought about her grandfather's words about the moment between breaths when the world stops moving. This was that moment, stretched out over hours and days, when everything hung in the balance. She had one chance to prove that the Friday liability who couldn't handle pressure was actually the only person who could see the truth clearly enough to act on it. Elena Rodriguez was about to find out if being right was enough to keep them all alive. Elena led Delta Company through the compound's maze of corridors with the precision of someone who had memorized every detail through her rifle scope. The fake Taliban fighters had completely vanished, leaving behind only their weapons and equipment scattered across the defensive positions. The elaborate stage set was being abandoned by its actors, but the real players were still inside. Captain Martinez moved beside Elena, his M4 carbine at the ready as they approached the command center. Behind them, 6 Marines provided overwatch, their movements coordinated and silent. Elena could feel the weight of their trust, knowing that her assessment of the situation was all that stood between them and potential disaster. Rodriguez, how many hostiles are we expecting? Martinez whispered as they reached the door to the command center. 3 confirmed, sir. All with military training and automatic weapons. But Captain, there's something else you need to know. Martinez held up his hand, signaling the team to halt. What is it? Elena pulled out a photograph she had taken with her phone inside the command center. It showed one of the computer screens, displaying a roster of personnel involved in the operation. Sir, look at this list. Martinez examined the image, his face growing pale as he read the names. These are all Pentagon officials. Deputy directors, intelligence coordinators, procurement officers. Sir, this conspiracy goes way deeper than we thought. Someone's been using military resources to conduct unauthorized operations, and they've been covering it up by eliminating anyone who gets too close to the truth. Martinez studied the photograph. Again, his expression grim. Rodriguez, if this is accurate, we're not just dealing with rogue operators. We're dealing with systemic corruption at the highest levels of military command. Elena nodded. Sir, I think Colonel Thompson was investigating this conspiracy when he was marked for elimination. The meeting we witnessed wasn't a weapons deal. It was an intelligence exchange. Before Martinez could respond, Elena's radio crackled with a new voice. Delta 6, this is actual. We have your position under surveillance. Extract immediately. Elena felt her blood freeze. Actual was the call sign reserved for the commanding general of their entire theater of operations. If someone was impersonating that authority, the conspiracy had access to the most sensitive military communications. Martinez keyed his radio. Actual, this is Delta 6. Request authentication code. Delta 6, authentication is not required. You will extract immediately and report to base for debriefing. Elena could see the conflict in Martinez's eyes. Disobeying a direct order from theater command would end his career, but following an order from an imposter could get them all killed. Sir, Elena said quietly, the real actual would never refuse to provide authentication codes. That's basic communications protocol. Martinez made his decision. Rodriguez, we're going in. But we do this fast and clean. Secure the evidence and extract immediately. Elena positioned herself beside the door while Martinez prepared to breach. The 6 Marines took positions to provide covering fire once they entered the room. On my mark, Martinez whispered. 3, 2, 1, go. Elena kicked open the door and immediately rolled right, her rifle scanning for targets. The room was empty, but she could hear voices coming from a second room beyond the command center. Delta 6, negative contact, Elena reported. But I have voices in the adjacent room. Martinez signaled his men to advance carefully. Elena could make out 3 distinct voices, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. She recognized one of them as the Phantom team leader who had been pursuing them. "Control, the Rodriguez situation is out of hand," the voice was saying. "She's got Delta Company believing her story, and they're moving to secure the command center." "Phantom team, you have authorization to eliminate all witnesses," came the response. "This operation cannot be exposed." Elena exchanged a glance with Martinez. They were listening to someone authorize the murder of an entire Marine unit. "Control, that's 30 Marines plus support personnel. A massacre of that magnitude will be impossible to cover up." "Phantom team, you have your orders. Execute immediately." Elena could hear movement in the adjacent room as the Phantom team prepared to ambush Delta Company. She had perhaps 30 seconds before they would come through the door with automatic weapons. "Captain, they're about to hit us," Elena whispered. "We need to move now." Martinez positioned his men to create a crossfire pattern that would give them the best chance of surviving the ambush. Elena found cover behind a metal desk and aimed her rifle at the doorway. The first Phantom team member appeared in the doorway exactly when Elena expected him. Her shot struck him center mass, dropping him before he could fire. The second man tried to use his teammate's body for cover, but Martinez's shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The third man, the team leader, threw a fragmentation grenade into the room before retreating. "Grenade!" Elena shouted. Diving behind the equipment rack, the explosion shattered the electronic equipment and filled the room with smoke and debris. Elena's ears were ringing, but she could see Martinez signaling his men to advance through the smoke. Elena moved through the haze toward the adjacent room, her rifle ready. The team leader was wounded but still fighting, his automatic weapon sending bursts of gunfire toward Elena's position. Elena used the smoke for concealment, moving to flank the shooter. She could see him reloading behind an overturned table. His movements quick but desperate. "Drop your weapon!" Elena shouted. "You're surrounded!" The response was another burst of automatic fire, but Elena could tell from the sound that he was running low on ammunition. Elena flanked around the table and found herself face to face with the team leader. He was a man in his 40s, with the weathered face of someone who had spent years in combat zones. His uniform bore no identifying patches, but Elena could see a tattoo on his forearm that indicated Special Forces training. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, his weapon still pointed at Elena. "The people you're protecting are the real traitors." "Then explain it to me," Elena replied, keeping her rifle trained on his center mass. "Help me understand why you're trying to kill American Marines." The man's finger tightened on the trigger. "Because sometimes good people have to die to protect the greater good." Elena saw his intention a split second before he acted. Her shot was precise and final, ending the threat before he could fire on her position. Martinez and his men secured the room, checking for additional threats while Elena examined the equipment the Phantom team had been using. What she found made her stomach turn. The communication equipment was military grade, but it had been modified to impersonate official channels. The computer terminals contained files on dozens of military personnel, including detailed profiles, personal information, and assessment reports. "Captain, they've been building dossiers on military personnel," Elena said, scrolling through the files. "Look at this." Martinez joined her at the computer terminal. Elena had found her own file, which contained information that should have been classified. Her service record, psychological evaluations, family background, and a detailed analysis of her capabilities and weaknesses. "Elena, they've been planning this operation for months," Martinez said, reading over her shoulder. "They knew exactly how you would respond to different situations." Elena opened another file and found Colonel Thompson's dossier. According to the information, Thompson wasn't a traitor at all. He was an undercover investigator working for the Pentagon's Inspector General, tasked with exposing corruption in military contracting. Captain Thompson was one of the good guys, Elena said, her voice filled with amazement. He was investigating illegal arms sales, and someone decided to eliminate him. Martinez read the file carefully. Rodriguez, this says Thompson had evidence of weapons being sold to enemy forces by American defense contractors. The briefcase he was carrying contained documentation that would have exposed the entire network. Elena felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Sir, the people running this operation weren't trying to prevent weapons sales. They were trying to cover up weapons sales that had already happened. Martinez was scanning through more files when Elena's radio crackled with a familiar voice. Delta 6, this is Hammer 6. I'm alive and I need immediate extraction. Elena's heart leaped. It was Colonel Thompson, and he was calling from somewhere nearby. Hammer 6, this is Delta 6, what's your location? Delta 6, I'm approximately 800 meters northeast of the compound. I have critical intelligence, but I'm being pursued by hostile forces. Elena looked at Martinez. Sir, we need to extract him. He's the only one who can explain what's really happening here. Martinez nodded. Rodriguez, take 2 men and secure Thompson. We'll continue gathering evidence here. Elena selected Corporal Wilson and Private Garcia to accompany her. As they prepared to leave the compound, Elena's radio crackled with multiple voices, all claiming to be Thompson and requesting extraction from different locations. Captain, they're trying to confuse us, Elena said. Someone's impersonating Thompson to prevent us from finding the real one. Rodriguez, how do you propose we determine which voice is authentic? Elena thought about the authentication codes she had memorized during her years of service. Sir, I'll ask each Thompson to provide information that only the real colonel would. No, Elena keyed her radio. All stations claiming to be Hammer 6, this is Overwatch. Provide your service number and authentication code. 3 different voices responded, each claiming to be Thompson and providing different authentication codes. Elena recognized that 2 of them were obviously fake, but the third voice provided codes that seemed plausible. Hammer 6, this is Overwatch. What was the name of the operation you briefed us on yesterday? Overwatch, the operation was designated Falcon Strike, targeting Taliban commander Halil Nazir. Elena felt her suspicions confirmed. The real Thompson would have known that the operation was called Desert Falcon, not Falcon Strike. The voice claiming to be Thompson was another imposter. Captain, they're all fake, Elena reported. Someone's created multiple false Thompsons to waste our time and resources. Martinez looked at her with growing concern. Rodriguez, if Thompson is really out there, how do we find him without falling into another trap? Elena studied the tactical map, thinking about Thompson's likely behavior patterns. Sir, Thompson would try to reach high ground where he could. Observe the situation and maintain communication. The nearest elevated position is Hill 394, about 1,000 meters northeast. Rodriguez, that's directly through the area where we took sniper fire earlier. Elena shouldered her rifle. Sir, that's exactly where Thompson would go. He'd know that area would be avoided by hostile forces after the sniper engagement. Martinez made his decision. All right, Rodriguez. But we do this carefully. If this is another trap, we need to be ready for it. Elena led Wilson and Garcia out of the compound through the same rear entrance she had used earlier. The area was now quiet, with no sign of the Taliban fighters who had been providing covering fire during the assault. As they moved through the desert terrain, Elena's radio crackled with a new voice. Delta 6, this is Phoenix 6. We have authorization to terminate the Delta Company mission. All personnel will return to base immediately. Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. Phoenix 6 was a call sign that didn't exist in any military organization she knew of. Someone was escalating their impersonation campaign, now claiming to have authority over the entire operation. "Captain, that's not a real call sign," Elena reported. "Someone's trying to abort our mission." "Rodriguez, I'm getting multiple conflicting orders from different command authorities. Someone is flooding our communications with false information." Elena realized the full scope of what they were facing. The conspiracy wasn't just about eliminating Thompson or covering up weapon sales. It was about controlling the flow of information and manipulating military units through sophisticated electronic warfare. "Sir, we need to find Thompson before they can eliminate him. He's the only one who can expose the truth about what's happening." Elena increased their pace, moving through the rocky terrain with the urgency of someone who understood that time was running out. Behind them, the compound was now smoking from the grenade explosion, and Elena could see helicopters approaching. From the south. "Wilson, Garcia, we've got aircraft inbound," Elena said, pointing toward the helicopters. "Unknown configuration, possibly hostile." Elena found cover behind a boulder formation and used her rifle scope to examine the approaching aircraft. The helicopters were painted in military colors, but they didn't match any configuration she recognized. "Elena, those aren't our birds," Wilson said, scanning them with his binoculars. "The markings are wrong." Elena keyed her radio. "Delta 6. We have an unknown aircraft approaching from the south. Advise you to take defensive positions. Rodriguez, those aircraft are not on our flight schedule. Treat them as hostile until proven otherwise." Elena watched through her scope as the helicopters began circling the compound. She could see armed personnel preparing to rappel from the aircraft. "Sir, we're about to have company," Elena reported. Multiple aircraft with armed personnel preparing to assault the compound. Elena realized that the conspiracy had moved to the final phase of their operation. They were deploying a significant force to eliminate all witnesses and destroy all evidence. Elena Rodriguez, the liability who couldn't handle pressure, was now the only person standing between the truth and a successful cover-up that would protect. A network of corruption reaching to the highest levels of military command. She had one chance to find Thompson and expose the conspiracy before the cleanup operation eliminated everyone who knew the truth. Elena shouldered her rifle and began moving toward Hill 394, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether justice would prevail or whether the truth would be buried along with everyone who had tried to expose it. Elena sprinted across the desert terrain with Wilson and Garcia flanking her, their boots churning up clouds of dust as they moved toward Hill 394. Behind them, the sound of helicopters grew louder, and Elena could hear the distinctive whine of fast-rope deployment systems. The cleanup crew was moving in, and they had minutes before the entire area would be swarming with hostile forces. "Elena, movement on our 6. Wilson shouted, dropping to one knee and raising his rifle. Elena spun around to see armed figures rappelling from the helicopters, their black tactical gear making them look like mechanical spiders descending from the sky. She counted at least 12 operators, all carrying automatic weapons and moving with the coordinated precision of special operations personnel. "They're not trying to capture us," Elena realized, watching the deployment pattern. "They're setting up a perimeter to contain us." Garcia was scanning the surrounding terrain with his binoculars. "Elena, we've got more movement on the western ridge. Looks like another team moving to cut off our escape route." Elena felt the tactical situation closing around them like a noose. The conspiracy had deployed significant resources to ensure that no one escaped with evidence of their operation. But Elena had spent years learning to think 3 moves ahead, and she had one advantage the enemy didn't expect. "Wilson, Garcia, we're not running from them," Elena said, checking her rifle and adjusting her scope. "We're using them to find Thompson." "Elena, what are you talking about?" Wilson asked, his voice tight with stress. Elena pointed toward the helicopters. which were now hovering over different areas of the desert. Look at their search pattern. They're not just looking for us. They're systematically searching areas where Thompson might be hiding. Elena used her rifle scope to study the aircraft movements. The helicopters were conducting a grid search, focusing on elevated positions and areas with good visibility. But one helicopter was hovering persistently over a specific area, about 600 meters north of their position. There, Elena said, indicating the persistent helicopter. That's where Thompson is. They found him, but they haven't been able to eliminate him yet. Garcia looked through his binoculars toward the indicated position. Elena, that's a sheer cliff face. How could Thompson be hiding there? Elena studied the terrain through her scope, using the magnification to examine details that would be invisible to the naked eye. There's a cave system in that rock formation. Thompson probably found shelter there and is using the elevation to maintain radio contact. Wilson was monitoring their radio frequencies, listening to the chatter from the hostile forces. Elena, they're coordinating a ground assault on that position. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they overrun it. Elena made a decision that would have seemed impossible an hour earlier. We're going to assault a superior force in a prepared position to rescue a colonel who may or may not be in a cave system we can't see. Elena, that's suicide, Garcia said. Those operators have us outgunned and outnumbered. Maybe, Elena replied, checking her ammunition. But they don't know what we know, and they're not expecting us to attack them. Elena began moving toward the cliff face, using the rocky terrain for concealment. Her grandfather had taught her that the best hiding place was often in plain sight, and she intended to use that principle against professional operators who expected conventional tactics. Elena, how are we going to get close enough to make a difference? Wilson asked, following her through the boulder field. We're going to use their own operation against them, Elena said, pointing to the helicopters. Those aircraft are creating noise and dust clouds that will mask our approach. They can't see us if they're focused on the cliff face. Elena led Wilson and Garcia through a series of narrow ravines that provided concealment while allowing them to move closer to the target area. The sound of helicopter rotors was deafening, but it also meant that the ground forces couldn't hear their approach dot as they moved closer. Elena could see the tactical situation developing. The hostile forces had deployed in a semicircle around the base of the cliff, with teams preparing to climb the rock face from multiple directions. They were using military-grade equipment and moving with the efficiency of people who had done this before. Elena, I count 16 operators, all with automatic weapons, Wilson reported, using his scope to assess the enemy positions. They've got us outnumbered 4-1. Elena was studying the cliff face through her rifle scope, looking for any sign of Thompson's position. The rock formation was honeycombed with caves and crevices, any of which could provide shelter for a single person. There, Elena said, pointing to a cave entrance about halfway up the cliff face. I can see movement in that cave. Someone's using a mirror to signal. Elena watched as flashes of reflected sunlight came from the cave entrance, following a pattern that she recognized as military Morse code. The message was brief but crucial. Evidence secured. Under attack. Immediate extraction required. That's Thompson, Elena said. He's alive, he has the evidence, and he's running out of time. Garcia was monitoring the hostile forces' radio chatter through his equipment. Elena, they're planning to use explosives to collapse the cave system. They're not trying to capture Thompson. They're trying to bury him alive. Elena felt urgency surge through her system. Thompson had evidence that could expose the entire conspiracy, but the people trying to cover it up were prepared to commit murder to protect their secrets. Wilson, Garcia, we need to create a diversion, Elena said, studying the tactical situation. If we can draw their attention away from the cliff face, Thompson might be able to escape. Elena, what kind of diversion are you thinking about? Wilson asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. He wasn't going to like the answer. Elena pointed to the helicopters hovering above them. "We're going to shoot down their aircraft." Wilson stared at her. "Elena, we don't have anti-aircraft weapons. We've got rifles." "We don't need to destroy them," Elena said, adjusting her rifle scope. "We just need to damage them enough to force them to land." Elena had studied aircraft vulnerability points during her sniper training, learning how to disable enemy aircraft with precise shots to critical systems. Helicopters were particularly vulnerable because they depended on complex mechanical systems that could be disrupted by small arms fire. "Elena, that's a hell of a long shot," Garcia said. Watching the helicopters maneuver above them, Elena was already calculating angles and lead times. "The main rotor assembly is the most vulnerable point. If I can hit the swash plate or the tail rotor, the aircraft will be forced to make an emergency landing." Elena positioned herself behind a boulder that would provide stable support for her rifle. The helicopter was maintaining a hover about 400 meters away, well within her effective range, but moving unpredictably. "Elena, you get one shot at this," Wilson said, watching the aircraft through his binoculars. "If you miss, they'll know exactly where we are." Elena controlled her breathing, waiting for the moment between heartbeats when her body would be perfectly still. The helicopter was banking slightly to the left, presenting its tail rotor assembly. Elena squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the tail rotor assembly, and Elena immediately saw the aircraft begin to spin uncontrollably. The pilot was fighting to maintain control, but the damage was too severe. The helicopter began descending rapidly, its emergency systems activating. "Direct hit," Garcia shouted. "The aircraft is going down." Elena was already shifting her aim toward the second helicopter, which was now banking away from the cliff face to avoid the same fate, but the distraction was working. The ground forces were redirecting their attention toward the crash site, and Elena could see Thompson beginning to descend from the cave entrance. "Elena, Thompson's moving," Wilson reported. "He's rappelling down the cliff face." Elena could see Thompson through her scope, moving with the skill of someone who had spent years in combat zones. He was carrying a backpack and what appeared to be a radio, descending toward a ledge about 200 meters above the ground. But Elena could also see that several of the hostile operators had spotted Thompson's movement and were redirecting their fire toward his position. Bullets were striking the rock face around him, sending chips of stone cascading down the cliff. "Elena, they're trying to cut Thompson's rope," Garcia shouted. Elena shifted her aim toward the hostile operators, looking for the best target. The range was challenging, but she could see one operator who was in a position to threaten Thompson directly. Elena's shot struck the operator in the shoulder, spinning him around and disrupting his aim. But there were still 15 other operators, and they were all now focused on eliminating Thompson before he could reach the ground. "Wilson, Garcia, we need to get closer," Elena said, already moving toward the cliff face. "Thompson's going to need covering fire to reach the extraction point." Elena led her team through the boulder field, using the chaos of the helicopter crash to mask their approach. She could hear orders being shouted in multiple languages, suggesting that the hostile forces included foreign personnel. As they moved closer, Elena could see Thompson had reached the ledge and was preparing to descend the final 200 meters to the ground. But the hostile operators were setting up a coordinated firing position that would make his descent impossible. "Elena, they're going to kill him before he reaches the ground," Wilson said. Watching the tactical situation develop, Elena made another decision that would have seemed impossible at the beginning of the day. "We're going to assault their position directly." "Elena, that's 15 operators with automatic weapons," Garcia protested. "We'll be slaughtered." "Not if we're smart about it," Elena replied, studying the enemy positions through her scope. "They're concentrated in a defensive formation, which means they're vulnerable to flanking attacks." Elena identified a narrow ravine that would allow them to approach the enemy position from the side, where their defensive fire would be less effective. It was a dangerous gamble, but Thompson's life depended on their ability to disrupt the enemy's concentration. "Elena, what's the plan?" Wilson asked, checking his ammunition. Elena pointed to the ravine. "We move through that approach, get within effective range, and then create as much chaos as possible. We don't need to eliminate all of them. We just need to give Thompson enough time to reach the ground." Elena began moving through the ravine, her rifle ready and her mind focused on the task ahead. Behind her, Wilson and Garcia followed with the discipline of Marines who trusted their leader's judgment. As they moved closer to the enemy position, Elena could hear Thompson's voice on the radio, coordinating with someone who was apparently providing him with intelligence about the hostile forces' positions. "Control, this is Hammer 6, Thompson was saying. "I have the documentation, but I need immediate extraction. The hostile forces are numerous and well-equipped." Elena realized that Thompson was in contact with legitimate military authorities, which meant that help was coming. But the question was whether it would arrive in time to save Thompson's life. "Elena, we're 100 meters from their position," Wilson reported. "We need to move now if we're going to make a difference." Elena could see Thompson beginning his final descent, his rope stretched taut as he lowered himself toward the ground. The hostile operators were taking aim, their weapons trained on his position. Elena had one chance to save Thompson's life and preserve the evidence that could expose the conspiracy. The liability who couldn't handle pressure was about to discover what she was really made of. Elena Rodriguez raised her rifle and prepared to take the most important shot of her life. Elena's crosshairs centered on the lead operator's chest just as his finger began to squeeze the trigger aimed at Colonel Thompson. Time seemed to slow, the way it always did in those critical moments when everything balanced on the edge of a single decision. Thompson was 20 feet from the ground, exposed and vulnerable, while 15 hostile operators prepared to end his life. Elena's shot rang out across the desert, followed immediately by the crack of Wilson's rifle, then Garcia's. The coordinated volley struck 3 operators simultaneously, creating the chaos Elena had hoped for. The remaining hostiles dove for cover, their attention now split between Thompson's descending figure and the unexpected threat from their flank. "Move, move, move!" Elena shouted, already shifting position to avoid return fire. Thompson hit the ground running, clutching his backpack against his chest as bullets sparked off the rocks around him. Elena could see him sprinting toward a cluster of boulders that would provide temporary shelter, but the hostile operators were regrouping quickly. Elena's radio crackled with Thompson's voice. "Overwatch, this is Hammer 6. I'm on the ground but pinned down. Need immediate suppressing fire on the ridgeline." "Hammer 6, this is Overwatch. We've got you covered. Move to Rally Point Alpha on my mark." Elena had never established a Rally Point Alpha with Thompson, but she was betting that a career officer would understand the deception. She needed him to move toward her position while making the hostile operators think he was heading elsewhere. "Copy. Overwatch, moving to Rally Point Alpha in 30 seconds. Elena smiled grimly. Thompson was playing along, which meant he understood they were dealing with compromised communications. Elena positioned herself to provide covering fire while Thompson moved. Through her scope, she could see the lead operator coordinating his team's response, directing fire toward Thompson's position while trying to maintain visual contact. Elena's next shot eliminated the team leader, but not before he had coordinated a flanking maneuver that would cut off Thompson's escape route. The hostile operators were professional and disciplined, adapting quickly to the changing tactical situation. "Elena, we've got movement on our left flank," Wilson called out, engaging targets with controlled bursts from his M4. Elena could see that the hostile forces were trying to surround them, using superior numbers to overwhelm their position. But Elena had learned something during her years as a sniper that her critics had never understood. Sometimes the best defense was an impossible offense. Wilson Garcia, on my signal, we advanced directly toward their position, Elena said, checking her ammunition. Elena, that's suicide, Garcia protested. No, that's a surprise. They're expecting us to fall back. They're not expecting us to attack. Elena led the charge across open ground, firing as she moved. The hostile operators were caught off guard by the frontal assault, their defensive position suddenly becoming disadvantageous when the threat came from an unexpected direction. Elena's rifle cracked repeatedly as she advanced, each shot finding its target with the precision that had made her reputation. Wilson and Garcia flanked left and right, their coordinated fire creating overlapping fields that prevented the hostile operators from regrouping. Thompson used the distraction to move toward Elena's position, carrying his backpack and radio while staying low to avoid the crossfire. Elena could see determination in his movements, the purposeful stride of someone who understood the stakes. Hammer 6, move to the depression at your 2 o'clock, Elena called out, indicating a natural trench that would provide cover. Thompson sprinted toward the indicated position just as Elena's shot dropped another hostile operator who was trying to flank his movement. The coordination between them was seamless, built on years of military training and mutual trust. Overwatch, I've got the evidence, Thompson said as he reached Elena's position. But we need to get it to people who can act on it. Elena looked at Thompson, seeing him clearly for the first time since the mission began. He was older than she had expected, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent in difficult places. But his eyes were sharp and focused, the gaze of someone who had seen the truth and was determined to expose it. Colonel, what exactly are we dealing with? Elena asked while maintaining overwatch on the remaining hostile operators. A defense contractor called Titan Solutions has been selling American weapons to enemy forces, then covering up the sales by eliminating anyone who discovers the truth, Thompson explained, patting his backpack. I've got documentation of sales, worth over $2 billion. Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. Sir, they were trying to eliminate you to protect their operation. More than that, Rodriguez. They were trying to eliminate anyone who might have seen the evidence. That includes you and your team. Elena's radio crackled with a new voice. Delta 6, this is Viper 1. We have your position under observation. Prepare for extraction. Elena felt hope surge through her system. Viper 1 was a legitimate call sign she recognized from previous operations. Viper 1, this is Delta 6. Authentication code, Sierra 47. Delta 6, authentication confirmed. We show multiple hostile personnel in your area. Prepare for close air support. Elena looked up to see 2 Apache helicopters approaching from the south, their weapons systems already locking onto the remaining hostile operators. The cavalry had finally arrived, Thompson smiled. Because you're the person who proved that. Sometimes being called a liability is just another way of saying you're willing to do what others won't. Elena Rodriguez, who had started as a simple sniper questioning her place in the military, had become the person who changed everything with one perfect shot. But more importantly, she had learned that the perfect shot wasn't about marksmanship. It was about choosing the right target at the right moment, for the right reasons. Elena accepted Thompson's offer, knowing that her real mission was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.